Well, I met Lee Kuan Yew as an ambassador just before I went to the UN. You know, I had dinner with him, and Mr. Lee wanted to size me up, I think. And, or did I meet him before I went to the US? Now let me think. Steve Solas came. Oh, I think it's the UN, you know. We were talking about the Cambodian issue. And I thought he was trying to see how I ate, whether I, you know, had the appropriate manners, you know, that I carried myself well enough to represent Singapore, you know. And I think he wanted to see how I carried myself and interacted in a social setting. There was lunch, and Representative Steve Solas came. And he was a friend of Singapore, and he was a friend of ASEAN, and he tried to help us get a package for Cambodia. Cambodian aid was on our side when we fought the Cambodian issue at the UN. So I had dinner there. But my interaction with Mr. Lee has been quite checkered. I first met him as a young academic, and I was seen to be this, you know, irritant. And I think I would say things that PAP didn't quite like, but I was never anti-regime, and I was always respectful. When I make my criticisms, I don't write in a language that is mean or hateful, you know, and it's like spitting on the other side. I don't do that. I write as an academic. I write in a very polite style. It's never personal, and I never touch on personal issues. It is always a policy, and I had a special interest in seeing greater intellectual space given to academics and greater space given to the opposition. I was seen as a classic liberal academic, and I think this was what I kind of mentioned, you know. And later I began to see, you know, are you distributing enough to the workers, you know, but that was what primarily I was seen to be a liberal academic, but I was not someone who was going to kick the table over, you know, I wasn't going to rip up the regime, the governance of Singapore. It's just that I wanted these policies corrected. So I think the PAP saw that. Anyway, I was named to be ambassador to the UN. It's a long story. We don't have time here. But after I became ambassador, and particularly after I came back from the UN, you have to understand that the world was changing. I came back from the UN in 1991, just after the first Gulf War, when Iraq invaded Kuwait. But within 2-3 years, it was the Soviet Union dissolved. There's a collapse of the Soviet Union. And I think Mr. Lee wanted to understand the world. What was happening? End of a world order? It's just the US alone? What's happening? Soviet Union has collapsed. He invited Tomiko Kishore, Mahbubani, and I to lunch with him. And we lunched with him quite often, you know, in the Istana. And during those lunches, he would talk. I don't know why he chose us. Some people think that it's because we talked back. If he said something, we were not afraid to disagree. You know, we were known to be quite independent-minded. I think that was the point. So he talked most of the time, and we disagreed with him, you know. And it went on till he had a heart problem. He had a stent. Then he had to be very careful about what he ate, so we never had lunch together. Not that it was such a, you know, rich lunch. It was quite a Spartan lunch, like Mr. Lee Kuan Yew in the Istana, simple, you know. And we talked. And now, that was my first glimpse of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, okay, at close range, because he never came to the UN. Later, I saw him a lot because he came to the US. So that was one. Then, after that period of exchanges, he started writing his own memoirs, And when he did, he had a few of us. He sent his chapters to. I was one of them. And he would tell us to read it and critique it. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it slag? Will people be interested? So, he said, no, that's not how it should be interpreted. He said, why not? And then you would argue back and forth. And he argues fiercely. I think Singaporeans get so scared because he will argue. Don't forget, he's a lawyer. He wants to win the argument. So he will come strong. So you must be equally strong to push back. And you must know your facts. So that I learned from that actually he's very open, and he will take criticisms, and then he'll send back the chapter after you. Can you imagine? He sends me the chapter. I send it back to him.
And this were the pre-email days, or were they?
It was email days.
Yeah.
But many people didn't use emails. Yeah. He did. He learned to do email, to write his memoirs, the computer. And I didn't know how to use it then. And I said, oh, Mr. Lee, he said, I learned to use a computer because I wanted to write my memoirs. I said, oh my goodness. And if a senior minister has learned to use a computer at his age, I really should learn to use a computer. Yes. He said, quite so, So anyway, my point is that he was very open to changes, arguments, and he'll come back and say, is this right? I've changed it. How does it read again? And if you make another comment, he'll change it again. And I'm only one person. 3-4 others read it. So you can imagine he will answer everybody. So he's very open to criticism to make the product better. But you must know your arguments.